Now please welcome to the stage Maya Brookle. The name echoed through the glittering ballroom like a ghost from the past, and David Hamilton froze mid-sip of his champagne. Maya Brookle. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 8 years, not since he had turned his back on a life he wasn't ready for. The music faded into the background. The murmurs, the clinking glasses, the soft laughter all drowned beneath the flood of memories that name summoned. David turned slowly toward the stage, and there she was. Maya stepped into the spotlight with the same poise she'd carried even when they had nothing back, when they shared a cramped studio apartment and whispered dreams about a future neither of them fully believed in. She wore a navy gown that flowed like calm water, her natural curls swept into a modest updo. Her voice, when she began speaking about the gala's mission to support underfunded schools, was clear, warm, and commanding. David blinked. Maya wasn't just attending the gala, she was organizing it. He felt something shift in his chest. A weight he hadn't realized was still there. Without thinking, he began walking toward the stage, then circled around toward the reception area where Maya had just stepped off to greet attendees. He waited for a moment, then approached. "Maya," he said softly. She turned. Her eyes landed on him, calm and unreadable. "David," she said. No gasp, no shock, just recognition measured and controlled. "You're the organizer of all this?" he asked, gesturing around. She nodded. "I'm the director of the Future Pathways Foundation now. We partnered with the city for tonight." David smiled, trying to mask his internal tremble. "You've come a long way." "So have you," Maya said, her voice even. That's when David noticed the boy. Standing beside her, holding the edge of her evening shawl, was a small boy 7, maybe 8. He wore a neatly pressed suit, his curly brown hair parted to the side, but it was the eyes gray-green and piercing that made David's breath catch. His own eyes, mirrored. His heart stumbled. "Is he?" Maya's arm instinctively moved in front of the boy. "He's my son." David looked at her. "Maya, I can see it. He's—" "No," she said, firm and low. "He's mine." And just like that, the past returned, not with anger or blame, but with a quiet truth that could no longer be ignored. David came looking for closure but found a part of himself he never knew he'd left behind. What would you have done in his place? Could you face the life you once walked away from? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Share your thoughts, your feelings, or even your own stories of love, loss, and second chances. And if this moment moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and hit that bell so you never miss what's coming next. A silence dropped over the nearby guests. Conversations stalled. Champagne flutes hovered mid-air, heads turned. Suddenly, it seemed the entire ballroom was watching them two ghosts meeting in the middle of glitter and charity. David blinked. "I just the looks like me." Maya's gaze didn't waver. "That doesn't mean he knows you." A sharp sting settled in David's gut. He glanced around. Whispers rippled. Eyes stared. But Maya, composed as ever, placed her hand gently on the boy's shoulder and smiled softly at him, shielding him from the weight of the moment. David tried to say something, but his voice failed him. On the stage, the MC cleared her throat, attempting to return order. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Miss Brookle for her leadership tonight." Polite clapping began. Maya gave David one final look, one of quiet strength, not anger, then walked back toward the stage with her son. David stood rooted, heart pounding, caught in a moment he couldn't control, in a truth he couldn't deny. And from the edges of the crowd, the eyes of old colleagues, socialites, and reporters followed him, not as a celebrated philanthropist, but as a man suddenly exposed. This wasn't the celebration he had expected. It was something else entirely. The past had walked in on high heels, with a child by its side. David didn't remember walking back to his table. The applause had faded, the music resumed, but he still felt the spotlight burning on his back. The conversation, the boy's face, Maya's voice denying him in front of all those people replayed in his mind like a skipping record. He sat at the edge of the round table draped in ivory linen, ignoring the small talk from city officials and business partners seated nearby. His gaze remained fixed on the stage, where Maya stood smiling as she introduced the next speaker. She had slipped back into her role with ease, like the confrontation had never happened. Her voice didn't waver. Her smile was gracious, but David knew the storm behind it. The boy Elijah, he assumed, was no longer by her side. David scanned the room, then spotted him near a buffet table, accompanied by a young volunteer in a navy blazer. Elijah scooped macaroni and cheese onto a small plate, completely unaware of the quiet storm that had erupted just minutes earlier. David stood up. One of the guests at his table leaned in and whispered, "Everything all right, David? You look like you've seen a ghost." David forced a polite smile. "In a way, I have." He made his way toward the quieter corner of the room, near a row of tall windows that looked out onto the city skyline. Maya had just stepped off stage again, and for a moment, they were alone her, near the flower arrangement table, reading something on a clipboard. "I wasn't trying to cause a scene," David said as he approached her from behind. She didn't turn around. "Then maybe next time, don't assume so much in public." "I'm sorry," he said. "But Maya, come on, we both know he looks just like me." She turned then, slowly, her expression calm but tired. "And what if he does, David? What do you think that entitles you to?" David hesitated. "At least the truth. I deserve to know." Maya stepped closer, keeping her voice low but firm. "You walked away. You left when you had the chance to know. You don't get to show up years later and claim a role you never wanted to begin with." He felt her words like a slap, quiet but devastating. "I was scared," he said, "and stupid. I thought I had time. I thought maybe one day I'd be ready, and you'd still be there." "I was there," Maya whispered, "and you weren't." They stood in silence. Beyond the glass, traffic lights blinked through the early evening fog. Somewhere behind them, laughter erupted from a table of donors. It felt like a different world. David sighed. "What do I have to do? I don't want to take anything from you. I want to know him." Maya looked away, blinking slowly. "His name is Elijah. He's in 2nd grade. He likes soccer, science fiction, and eats too many blueberry muffins. He thinks his dad lives in heaven. That's what I told him. Because in every way that mattered, you weren't alive to us." David's breath hitched. "You told him I was dead?" "No," Maya said. "I told him his father was gone. And in the beginning, that felt like the truth." He swallowed hard, the words lodging in his throat. "I can't fix the past, Maya, but I can show him who I am now." She studied him for a long time, her face unreadable. "Then don't show him who you were. And don't try to impress him with money or gifts. Show up. Stay. Prove it." "Will you let me see him?" he asked. "Not tonight," she said softly. "Not like this." David nodded. He understood. The boy didn't need spectacle. He needed something real. A moment passed between them, quiet, tentative, almost tender. Then Maya's assistant called her name from across the room. "I have to go," she said, turning to leave. "Maya," he said. She paused. "Do you hate me?" Her eyes met his, weary but honest. "I hated the way you made me feel invisible, but I never hated you. Not even when I should have." She walked away then, heels clicking softly against marble, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. David stood alone by the window, watching her silhouette fade into mingling guests and servers balancing flutes of champagne. The sound of jazz drifted back in. The world kept turning. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. It was the young volunteer who had been with Elijah earlier. "Mr. Hamilton?" the boy said nervously. "Miss Brookle said you could take one of these if you're interested." He handed over a folded brochure. On the cover was a photo of smiling students and the bolded title, "Future Pathways, Building Legacies of Opportunity." David took it, nodding. "Thanks, kid." As the boy walked away, David unfolded the brochure. Inside was a letter from Maya, her mission statement as foundation director. One line near the bottom stood out. "Every child deserves to know they were wanted, even if it takes time to prove it." He closed the pamphlet slowly, staring out into the city's flickering lights. There was a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, David was ready to take the first step. The next morning, the city felt different. David Hamilton stood at the window of his high-rise condo, a steaming mug of black coffee untouched in his hand. Below, the streets of New Haven began to stir with the slow rhythm of a Sunday morning, dog walkers, joggers, the occasional church bell cutting through the crisp air. But David didn't notice any of it. He was still back in that ballroom, standing beneath the chandeliers, caught in Maya's voice, her words still circling in his mind like smoke in a closed room. He placed the coffee down, unopened, and walked across the polished wooden floors of his penthouse. On the kitchen counter, the brochure from the Future Pathways Foundation lay folded, creased now at the corners. He picked it up again, rereading Maya's message for the 5th time. Every child deserves to know they were wanted, even if it takes time to prove it. That line had kept him awake most of the night. David wasn't a man easily shaken. Over the past decade, he'd weathered market crashes, corporate betrayals, cutthroat deals, but nothing had prepared him for the look in Maya's eyes or the ache in his chest when she said, "He thinks his dad lives in heaven." He grabbed his phone and pulled up the contact list. No Maya, of course not. That part of his life had been boxed away years ago, but the foundation had a website. He found it quickly, skimmed past the donation button, and clicked on the staff section. Maya Brookle, Executive Director. Beneath her name, a small link. Schedule a meeting. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Then he clicked. The meeting was set for Wednesday afternoon. No promises, just a conversation. That afternoon, restless, David drove to the East End neighborhood, an older, quieter part of town with brownstone buildings, small community centers, and murals painted by local artists. It was the kind of place he used to avoid when he first became wealthy, convincing himself that success meant moving up and away. But today, he needed to see it, to understand the world Maya had built for their son without him. He parked near a small park and sat on a bench, watching children play on a worn jungle gym. It wasn't much, but it was safe, familiar. A boy ran past with a soccer ball, and for a split second, David thought it might be Elijah. Same quick feet, same posture. But the boy turned, and the illusion faded. Still, the image stuck with him. Later that evening, he called Greg Mathers, his attorney and longtime friend. "I need to update my estate plan," David said. "Updating, or changing completely?" Greg asked, curious. David leaned back in his chair. "I have a son, Greg. He doesn't know me yet, but I'm going to try to change that." There was silence on the other end. Then Greg replied, "Well, I guess congratulations are in order." "You sure about this?" Never been more sure of anything. He didn't sleep well that night. The next few days felt slow, like waiting for a verdict. Wednesday came gray and cool. David arrived at the Future Pathways office 15 minutes early. The building was Modesta refurbished post office, turned community hub. Inside, the walls were lined with photos of smiling children, thank you notes from parents, and quotes about education and equity. It was nothing like his sleek office in downtown. He sat on a vinyl chair in the small lobby, scanning the faces of the people who passed. A woman at the front desk smiled at him. "Mr. Hamilton, Miss Brookle will see you now." He rose, smoothed his jacket, and followed her down a short hallway. Maya stood at the doorway of her office, arms crossed loosely. She wore a simple blouse and slacks. No makeup, but she looked centered, like someone who knew exactly who she was. "David," she said. "Come in." He entered quietly, glancing around the room. Shelves of books on childhood development and nonprofit law. A framed certificate from Howard University. On the wall was a hand-drawn picture of a rocket ship, labeled, "To Mars," by Elijah. He smiled. "Nice art collection." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You wanted a meeting. What's this about?" He sat, folding his hands in his lap. "I'm not here to disrupt your life, or his. I know I don't deserve much, maybe nothing, but I need to try. Not just to see him. I want to understand who he is, from a distance if that's what you prefer." Maya leaned back. "Understand this, David. I've spent every day for the last 8 years making sure Elijah felt loved, safe, and whole. That took everything I had. You walking back in it changes things. Not for me, for him. And I can't afford to gamble with his heart." "I'm not asking you to gamble," he said. "I'm asking for a chance to earn my way in." She studied him for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a yellow folder. "This is the volunteer schedule for the Foundation's mentorship program. We work with at-risk kids in the afternoons. It's not glamorous. No cameras, no handshakes. Just kids who need consistency." He looked at her, surprised. "You want me to volunteer?" "I want to see if you can show up," she said. "Not for me, not even for Elijah. For someone, anyone." David took the folder, slowly. "I'll be there," he said. "Good," Maya replied. "Start Friday, 3 p.m. Wear something you can get paint on." As he left the office, stepping back into the gray light of afternoon, something inside David shifted. For the first time in years, he wasn't just chasing deals or image or redemption. He was chasing truth. And that truth, however painful or complicated, began here with paint-stained shirts, second graders, and a boy who didn't yet know his name. Friday afternoon arrived with the scent of rain still lingering in the air. The sun had returned, but the sidewalks shimmered wet, and the air felt scrubbed clean. David Hamilton pulled into the lot behind the Future Pathways Community Center, his luxury SUV looking distinctly out of place among the older sedans and minivans. He glanced at himself in the rearview mirror: blue jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, sneakers he'd bought the night before. No Rolex, no blazer. He looked like someone trying not to look like someone. Inside, the building buzzed with after-school energy. Kids' laughter echoed down the halls, mingling with the scrape of chairs, the rattle of supply carts, and the voice of a woman gently guiding a group toward the art room. David checked in at the front desk, where a young volunteer smiled and pointed toward a classroom. "Mr. Hamilton, you're with Miss V's group, room 3B. You'll be helping with the mural project today." He nodded, heart thumping louder than he expected. This wasn't a boardroom. There were no numbers to calculate, no competitors to outwit, just paint, kids, and the terrifying prospect of being seen as a manot, a name. Room 3B smelled like glue, tempera paint, and old markers. Inside, about a dozen kids were gathered around tables, busy sketching, coloring, and arguing over who got which paintbrush. A woman in her 40s, with silver-streaked braids and a t-shirt that read, "Art is Resistance," looked up. "You must be the new guy," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "I'm Vanessa, but everyone calls me Miss V. You got any experience with paint, Mr. Hamilton?" "Not since high school," David said, offering a nervous smile. "Well," she chuckled, "you'll fit right in." He was handed a paint apron and directed to a group of 4 kids working on a section of a large canvas mural, bright swirls of blues and oranges forming a stylized cityscape. They barely looked up as he approached. "Hi," he said. "I'm David." One girl, no older than 10, squinted at him. "You look like you're someone famous." "Nope," David said quickly. "Just here to help." The kids resumed painting. David crouched beside a boy struggling to mix green. "Add a little yellow," he offered. The boy did. "Whoa, that worked. Basic color theory." David smiled. An hour passed like a breeze through the trees. David found himself laughing, ducking stray splashes of paint, holding paper towels for spills. He forgot about board meetings and property deals. He was just a man helping a group of kids bring color to a wall. As the session neared its end, a familiar voice floated in from the hallway. "Elijah, your group's in room 4A. David's breath caught. Maya. She hadn't seen him yet. But her voice curled through the air like a ribbon of memory. And then, as if summoned by thought alone, Elijah walked past the open door. David stood, catching a glimpse of the boy's profile. Elijah stopped at the doorway, peering in curiously. His gaze swept the room, then landed on David. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Elijah looked confused, not afraid, just uncertain. Then Maya appeared behind him and gently guided him down the hall. She didn't look inside. David sat down slowly, pulse racing. The girl who had earlier asked if he was famous leaned over. "Hey," she said, "that boy looked just like you." David chuckled softly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yeah, I get that a lot." After cleanup, Miss V approached him. "You did good today. Not everyone shows up and actually gets their hands dirty." "Thanks," David said, wiping a spot of orange from his wrist. "Most of these kids," she continued, "they've had more adults disappear on them than show up. You want to make a difference? Come back. Over and over again." David nodded. "That's the plan." As he exited into the late afternoon sun, he found Maya waiting near the edge of the parking lot, arms folded. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked at him, really looked. There was no anger in her eyes now, just careful observation. "You surprised me," she said. "I'm full of surprises," David replied, then softened. "Did he say anything?" "He asked if you were the man from the gala," Maya said. I told him yes. And? He said you looked like the guy on the cereal box, the one who smiles too much. David laughed, the sound light and real. That sounds about right. Maya tilted her head. He'll ask more. Eventually. I hope so. She studied him for a moment longer. Are you really planning to come back? Every week, he said. Or more if you'll let me. Maya gave a faint nod. Let's take it one step at a time. No promises. Just presents. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded papera drawing from one of the kids, given to him as thanks. It showed a cartoon version of him holding a giant paintbrush, standing next to a smiling sun. He handed it to her. Tell Elijah this was made by my new friend Jasmine. Maybe he'd like to come meet her group next Friday. Maya took the paper, eyes scanning the crude but cheerful image. Then she looked up, her expression unreadable but not cold. I'll think about it. David nodded. It was more than enough for now. As she turned and walked toward her car, David felt the tightness in his chest loosen just a bit. For once, he hadn't tried to fix anything. He hadn't tried to charm or bargain. He'd just shown up. And somehow, that made all the difference. The following Friday, David arrived early. He parked across the street from the community center, carrying a paper bag from Betty's Diner, Elijah's favorite muffins, blueberry with a sugar crust on top. He wasn't sure if the gesture would matter, but it was something. A small act. A way to say, I remember. He crossed the street slowly, feeling the weight of anticipation with every step. Inside the art room, the air buzzed with familiar energy. Paints clattered, kids argued over brushes. Someone dropped a container of glitter. Miss V greeted him with a nod. Back again. That's a good sign. David smiled. I brought muffins. For the group. She chuckled. Careful. You're going to be popular. As the kids filed in, he handed out the muffins, making a note to save one. When the door creaked open again, David turned, expecting another group of students. But it wasn't just any group. It was Elijah. Maya walked in behind him, quiet but present. She didn't speak, only gave David a glancione that said, Don't mess this up. David crouched slightly. Hey there, Elijah. The boy eyed him with cautious curiosity, but not fear. Hi. I saved you a muffin, David said, offering it. Elijah stepped forward, took it without a word, and bit into it. His eyes lit up just a little. Betty's? David grinned. You've got good taste. Elijah nodded. Mom says I eat too many of these. She's probably right, David said. But they're pretty hard to resist. Elijah sat down at the edge of a table where other kids were painting. Maya hovered for a moment, then quietly stepped out. David stayed near, offering help as Elijah began dipping a brush into bright blue paint. What are you painting? David asked. A spaceship, Elijah replied. It's going to Mars. I'm designing it so kids can live up there. David raised his brows. That's pretty cool. Why Mars? No bullies, Elijah said simply. David paused, taken aback by the honesty. That's a good reason. Elijah didn't look up. Mom says Earth can be hard sometimes, but we still have to live on it. She's right, David murmured. They painted in relative silence. Elijah didn't ask questions, but he didn't push David away either. It was the beginning of something tentative, a fragile thread beginning to form. Later, as the kids cleaned up, David stepped out to find Maya. She was sitting on a bench just outside the entrance, sipping tea from a travel mug. He's brilliant, David said. I know, Maya replied. He's also cautious. It takes time for him to trust. I'm not in a rush, David said. I just want a real connection. Maya looked at him, measuring his sincerity. Then she pulled something from her tote bag, a slim vinyl record in a worn sleeve. What's that? He asked. Elijah found it in the attic, she said. It was one of your old records. You left it behind when you moved out. I used to play it when I was pregnant. He loves it now. Says the crackles make it sound like it's talking. David took the record gently, recognizing the old jazz label. Chet Baker, he whispered. I used to play this for you, when we couldn't afford anything but takeout and a second-hand stereo. Maya smiled faintly. He doesn't know it was yours. Not yet. I figured, maybe you could be the one to tell him. When you're ready. David felt a knot rise in his throat. Thank you. He deserves to know his story, Maya said, but only the parts you're willing to own. I'm ready to own all of it, he said. She stood. Good, because it's not about what you lost. It's about what you're willing to rebuild. Inside, Elijah appeared at the glass door, tapping lightly to show them his finished Mars spaceship painting. Maya smiled and waved. David did too. Come on, Maya said, walking toward the door. He wants to show you his engine room. David followed her in, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as a man slowly being written back into the story. Later that evening, long after the center had closed and the lights dimmed, David sat alone in his condo. The record spun on an old turntable he hadn't touched in years. Soft jazz filled the room, mingling with the gentle hum of city traffic outside. He stared out the window, holding Elijah's painting in one hand and the record sleeve in the other. There were still questions, still wounds, but something had shifted. This wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was the start of something better. It was presence, and that was enough for now. The following week, a light autumn chill crept into the mornings. Trees lining the city streets had begun to blush with color-burnt orange, deep crimson, yellow like butter left too long in the sun. David arrived at the Future Pathways Center with his jacket zipped high, a thermos of hot chocolate in one hand and a bundle of sketch pads in the other. He had picked them up the night before after noticing how Elijah always ran out of clean pages halfway through their art sessions. Inside, the kids were already bustling. Miss V waved him in. You're early again, starting to feel like a regular. I like the noise, David said. It's honest. She raised an eyebrow. Most people run from honest noise. He shrugged. Most people don't know what they're missing. Elijah appeared soon after, backpack bouncing, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. David watched as he made his way to their usual table, set his bag down, and greeted him with a small nod. Still cautious, but present. Still guarded, but curious. Brought you something, David said, handing over the sketch pads. Elijah opened the top one, his eyes lighting up at the clean pages. Thanks, mine at home are all scribbled over. Figured you could use a fresh start, David said, then paused, realizing how much weight those words carried. They spent most of the afternoon working on a new piece, Elijah's idea, a mural of kids from different neighborhoods building a rocket ship together. He spoke more this time, telling David about his school project on solar systems, how he wanted to be an astronaut, and how his mom once told him dreams were like stars always visible if you knew where to look. Did you have dreams when you were little? Elijah asked. David paused. I did. I wanted to be a jazz pianist. Elijah looked intrigued. What happened? David smiled softly. Life happened. I took a different path, but I still play sometimes, just not in public. You should play again, Elijah said simply, if it made you happy. That evening, as the center began to close, Maya arrived to pick up her son. She stepped into the room just as David was helping Elijah hang his newest sketch on the wall. Their eyes met. No words were needed. She'd seen the small shift, the softening in Elijah's body, the ease in his voice. He told me you used to play music, Elijah said to her, pointing at David. Real music, on stage and stuff. Maya nodded. He did. He was pretty good. David chuckled. She's being generous. They walked to the parking lot together, the late sunlight casting long shadows across the pavement. Elijah ran ahead to the car, humming quietly to himself. Maya lingered near the driver's side door. He's opening up, she said. I didn't expect it so soon. I'm grateful, David replied. But I know this isn't just about the two of us anymore. Maya looked at him, her expression thoughtful. I want to talk about something. About us. About back then. David nodded, heart bracing. I'm listening. She leaned against the car, arms crossed loosely. When I told you I was pregnant, I wasn't expecting magic. I wasn't expecting you to throw your life away for me. But I really hoped you'd at least want to be there. I was afraid, David said honestly, afraid I'd ruin it, that I wasn't good enough, that my family would disown me, that I'd lose everything I'd worked for. And instead, Maya said quietly, you lost something much deeper. He looked down. I know. I don't tell you this to punish you, she continued. I just need you to understand what it cost. For me, for him, the stories I had to rewrite, the explanations I had to come up with, the nights I heard him ask why his dad didn't want him. David swallowed hard, his throat thick. I want to earn his trust, and yours. Then keep showing up, she said. Not just here, in the hard spaces too, in the silences, in the questions. She opened the car door, but before stepping in, she turned back to him. Come to dinner, she said. David blinked. What? Tomorrow, 6 o'clock. Our place. Nothing fancy, just a meal. You should see how he lives. David felt something flicker in his chest hope. Nervousness. Awe. I'll be there, he said. She nodded once, then got in the car. Elijah waved at him through the window, and David waved back. The moment so ordinary, and yet so profound. The next day, David stood in front of Maya's apartment building with a bottle of apple cider and a small bouquet of autumn flowers. He rang the buzzer, heart pounding louder than it had on any stage, in any boardroom, during any deal. When the door opened and Elijah shouted, "Mom, he brought cider." David knew this wasn't just another visit. It was a beginning. Maya's apartment was warm and lived in, filled with soft light and the subtle scent of cinnamon. The walls bore signs of real-life drawings taped to the fridge, books stacked on the end tables, a worn rug with a corner that never quite lay flat. David stood just inside the door, holding his cider and flowers like a schoolboy unsure where to step. "Come in," Maya said, smiling as she took the flowers. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I wanted to," David replied, slipping off his shoes. "It's been a long time since I had dinner somewhere that felt like home." Elijah darted out from the kitchen, socked feet sliding slightly on the hardwood. "We made spaghetti. I helped with the sauce." "That's impressive," David said, crouching slightly. "You like to cook?" "Yeah," Elijah said proudly. "Mom says every good explorer should know how to make his own food." David chuckled. Wise advice. Maya set the cider on the counter and arranged the flowers in a simple glass vase. "Dinner's almost ready. You can have a seat." The table was small but neatly set for 3, with mismatched plates and cloth napkins. A small candle flickered in the center, surrounded by a few Lego astronauts posed like dinner guests. David sat opposite Elijah, trying not to appear too formal. Conversation flowed easier than he'd expected. Elijah talked about school, his science fair project, and his dream of building a robot that could do homework. David listened intently, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, encouraging his ideas. "You really think I can be an astronaut?" Elijah asked, twirling spaghetti on his fork. "I don't just think it," David said. "I believe it. You've got the mind, the heart, and definitely the imagination." Elijah grinned. Maya, watching quietly, seemed to absorb the moment like sunlight guarded, but no longer distant. After dinner, Elijah excused himself to his room to finish a drawing. David and Maya remained at the table, sipping cider. "You've made a beautiful home," David said. "It's not big, but it's enough," Maya replied. "Every inch here means something." They sat in a companionable silence for a moment. "He's amazing," David said softly, "and so much like you." "He's got your eyes," Maya admitted. "Your stubbornness too." David smiled, but then turned serious. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy, not the business kind, the real kind. What we leave behind in people." Maya met his gaze. "It's not just about what you leave. It's about what you build while you're still here. I want to build something with him, not just moments, a foundation." "That takes time," she said, "and honesty." David looked down. "There's something I haven't told you. My father, he wasn't much of one. When I was Elijah's age, he walked out. I grew up thinking that made me stronger, but now I see it just made me afraid." Maya was quiet for a beat, then said, "That fear still lives in you?" "It does," he admitted, "but I'm tired of letting it decide things for me." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is your time to rewrite the story." Just then, Elijah returned, holding a sheet of paper. "I made this," he said, holding it out to David. "It's a map of the rocket I'm building. There's a co-pilot seat." David took the drawing with reverence. The spaceship was elaborate, labeled in careful handwriting. One of the tiny stick figures in the cockpit had gray-green eyes and wavy hair. "Co-pilot, huh?" David asked. "Yeah," Elijah said. It's for someone who knows how to steer but still listens. David looked up at Maya, emotion swelling in his chest. I'd be honored, he said. They spent the rest of the evening on the living room floor, building Lego versions of Elijah's rocket design. Maya watched as David let Elijah lead, asking questions, learning, not correcting, not controlling, just showing up. When it was time to leave, David stood at the door, reluctant. Same time next week? Maya asked. David's smile was soft but certain. I'll bring dessert. As he stepped out into the cool night, the sounds of the city hummed around him, but inside his chest, something deeper stirred a warmth he hadn't known he missed. For the first time in years, David Hamilton felt like he belonged somewhere, not in a tower of glass and deals, but at a small table, with spaghetti and mismatched plates, and a boy who had just offered him a seat beside the stars. The following week dawned crisp and clear, the sky pale blue beyond the windows of Maya's living room as David arrived with a simple apple pie wrapped in wax paper. He knocked lightly. Elijah answered almost immediately, beaming. Dad, he called. David smiled, stepping inside as Maya greeted him in a cozy cardigan. Over coffee and pie, conversation felt lighter, friendlier. Maya and David traded small talk about school schedules and community events. Elijah perched on the arm of Maya's sofa, sporting pajamas with rockets printed on them. He leaned back, drawing quietly while occasional laughter rippled through the room. As evening settled in around them, Elijah excused himself and scampered off to his room. Once the door closed, David and Maya shared a moment of silence, comfortable, measured. Do you ever regret leaving? Maya asked, accepting a coffee cup. David looked into the dark liquid as if it contained history. Every day, he admitted. But regret alone doesn't solve things. He glanced up. I've realized that I can't ask for forgiveness or a space in his life without facing what I left behind. Maya listened. So tell me, what were you leaving behind, really? He swallowed. Fear most of all. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not fitting into the world I'd created for myself. He paused. And you? She tilted her head. I think you were asking for forgiveness sooner than you were ready to be forgiven. David nodded slowly. That's on me. In that quiet, their conversation woven through trust and hesitation, something shifted. Maya's expression softened not because the past was erased, but because she saw David's willingness to wrestle with it. Later that evening, David helped Elijah prepare his rocket-themed bedtime routine, reading a science fiction story, then tucking him in with a soft blanket. As he turned off the light, Elijah looked at him. Thank you for coming tonight. David smiled in the dim hallway. Thank you for inviting me. When he emerged downstairs to find Maya preparing to walk him to the door, she offered a cool breeze of autumn. Tomorrow morning, Elijah has soccer practice, she said. He'd like you to come if you'd like. David hesitated. Fields and cleats were new territory, but he nodded quickly. I'll be there. They stood on the stoop for a moment longer. Maya shook her head gently. You've surprised me, she said, more than once now. He reached to touch her arm, paused, then pulled back. Because I showed up. Her eyes glowed faintly in the streetlight. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing a man can do. The next morning, a chill lay on the grass of the local park as David stood at the edge of the soccer field. Elijah sprinted across the dew-wet turf, blonde hair catching sunlight, freckles bright. He paused to wave, gloved fingers dripping damp. David returned the wave, heart fluttering with something tender, pride, awe. The coach gathered kids into a circle. David watched Maya from the sideline, hands in jacket pockets, hair pulled back, nodding encouragingly. She looked utterly settled in this life built without him, yet willing enough to let him stand beside it now. Warm sweat dripped down David's neck as he cheered when Elijah scored his first goal. The boy's grin sent a spark through David's chest. After practice, Elijah threw himself into his arms. High five, Dad. David caught him midair. High five, superstar. Parents clapped and exchanged small greetings. Maya drew close. You interrupted my fantasy that he'd have an ordinary afternoon with his mom, she admitted, smiling. He told me he told his friends you came. David squeezed her shoulder. I wouldn't miss it. They walked home together, Elijah scampering ahead, talking about forming a space club and building alien traps. David chimed in with questions. their laughter drifting down the sidewalk. For the first time, he felt part of something tangible, something warm. That evening, alone with his laptop, David prepared for work the next week. But his mind drifted to Elijah's rocket design, Maya's quiet strength, and the empathy he'd once lacked. He revisited his earlier records letters never sent, voicemails never left, and listened to one clip that made his breath hitch. An old recording of his father's voice, blurred and distant. He realized then that absence could echo across generations, unless someone chose to fill it. David sent an unexpected text. "Maya, thank you for letting me watch Elijah on the field. It meant more than you know." He waited, heart pounding. When her reply came, "You're welcome. He's proud to have you there." He exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd held. As the twilight deepened over the city, David looked out at his reflection in the window. The skyline shimmered, but inside him, a different kind of light glowed built not on deals and fame, but on presence, repair, and the fragile but growing connections he'd claimed one day at a time. Monday arrived with an overcast sky and a heaviness David couldn't shake. At work, board members discussed year-end projections and strategic acquisitions, but his mind wandered constantly to Elijah and the way Maya had looked at him on the sidelines. He'd spent years commanding rooms, closing billion-dollar deals, but nothing had prepared him for the delicate terrain of rebuilding trust with a childer, the quiet steadiness of Maya's forgiveness. By late afternoon, he closed his laptop mid-call and left the office early, muttering something vague about a community obligation. He wasn't lying, not anymore. At the community center, Miss V gave him a warm nod. "Didn't expect to see you today." Thought I'd stop by, check on the mural," David said, gesturing toward the paint, splattered canvas still pinned across the far wall. "You're becoming a fixture," she smiled. "The kids like having you around. Elijah talks about you all the time." David's chest tightened. "He does?" "Oh yeah," she said, sorting paintbrushes. "He calls you the co-pilot, says you're gonna help him get to Mars." David chuckled quietly, overcome by a swell of emotion. "I'm trying." She glanced at him with kind eyes. "Just keep showing up, Hamilton. That's how rockets get off the ground, one bolt at a time." That evening Maya called. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice clear but tight. David froze for a beat. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," she said. "Number maybe. Can you come by?" 20 minutes later, he stood at her door again, coat still damp from the misty air. Maya ushered him in with a nod and sat him at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. Elijah was at a sleepover, his room dim and still. Maya placed an envelope in front of him. Inside was a copy of Elijah's birth certificate. David stared at it. His name wasn't on it. He looked up. "I always wondered." "I didn't list you," Maya said. "At the time, I thought it was the best way to protect him. From questions, from confusion, from disappointment." David nodded, swallowing. "I get that. But things are different now," she said. "You're different now." She reached into a folder and pulled out a form. "This is the paperwork to legally add your name. If that's something you want." David's hand trembled slightly as he touched the edge of the paper. "Yes, I want that. More than anything." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the offer settling between them. Then Maya exhaled, deep and slow. "There's something else," she said. "Elijah's school is doing a presentation, family history project. He asked me if you could come, if you'd be part of it." David blinked. "He wants that?" Maya nodded. "He's drawing a tree, says he wants you on a branch, not just watching from the ground." David smiled, something hot stinging behind his eyes. "Tell him I'd be honored." The next day, they began filling out the paperwork together. It was tedious, legal, full of boxes and signatures, but David completed every line with care. When Maya asked for a copy of his ID, he handed it over without question. As she filed away the forms, Maya paused. "He may ask about your family, about your father." David hesitated. "I've never talked about him, not even to myself." "Then maybe it's time," she said gently. "He deserves to know his story, the full one." That night, David opened a long-forgotten drawer in his study, pulling out a faded photo album and a yellowed envelope addressed in his father's handwriting. The letter inside was short, full of regrets and half-measures, but it was real. A fragment of a man who'd once walked away, just like he had. He stared at the signature Richard Hamilton and for the first time, didn't feel anger, just understanding. And a determination not to let history repeat itself. When Elijah returned the next day, David was already waiting with a new sketch pad. "Hey, co-pilot," he said. "Hey," Elijah beamed. "I'm gonna put you in the family tree now." David knelt. "Can I tell you a story first? About another Hamilton?" Elijah nodded, sitting cross-legged on the floor as David opened the old photo album. They spent the afternoon talking not about rockets or Mars or math but about family, about choices, about second chances. Later, as Maya watched from the doorway, Elijah asked, "Is Grandpa in heaven too?" David paused. "He is, but he left something behind, me, and now, I get to leave something better, you." Elijah smiled and hugged him. "I think we're gonna make a good tree." David held him tightly, a silent promise in his chest. He would show up, he would tell the truth, he would stay rooted. Elijah's school auditorium was buzzing with nervous energy and proud parents. Posters lined the walls, family trees drawn in crayon and colored pencil, timelines glued together with care. The Living History Night banner fluttered above the stage. David stood in the back of the room with Maya, watching Elijah pace near the curtains, a folder clutched tightly in his hand. "You think he's nervous?" David asked. Maya smiled. "He always is before he speaks, but once he starts, he's in his element." David nodded, adjusting the collar of his jacket. "He asked me this morning if my dad ever came to my school. I told him no, that I always hoped he would, but he never did." Maya's gaze softened. "And now?" "I told him I'm showing up for him the way I wanted someone to show up for me." A teacher called Elijah's name. He straightened, squared his shoulders, and stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit his small frame, but he didn't flinch. His voice, when it came, was clear and steady. "My name is Elijah Bruckle. This is my family tree." He held up his poster, a bright canvas filled with branches and names, each carefully printed. At the base, 2 roots extended downward. One read, "Maya Bruckle Mom." The other read, "David Hamilton Dad." A murmur went through the crowd. Maya glanced sideways, but David stayed focused on the boy. "My dad wasn't always in my life," Elijah continued, voice calm. "He was gone for a while. But he came back. And now he's helping me build things, like a rocket ship, and this family tree." Someone in the audience chuckled warmly. "He said he used to be scared," Elijah said, "but now he's not, because I told him it's okay to be scared, as long as you don't run away." David's eyes burned. Maya reached over and gently touched his hand. Afterward, parents clapped, cameras flashed, and Elijah returned to them grinning. David crouched to hug him. "You were incredible," he said. Elijah shrugged with a shy grin. "I didn't even stutter this time." Maya hugged her son too, brushing his hair back. "You made us proud." As they left the school and stepped into the cool evening, Elijah asked, "Can we get ice cream?" "It's a school night," Maya said. "But I just told our whole family story to 50 people, Elijah argued. Maya looked to David. "What do you think?" "I think bravery should always be rewarded with ice cream," David said. Later, sitting outside a quiet diner with 3 cones between them, they talked about the stars. Elijah pointed to Orion's belt and asked if they'd ever seen a meteor shower. David promised they would go to the observatory soon. Maya watched father and son talk, the glow of neon signs washing them in soft color. She felt something shift, something inside her. It wasn't forgetting the past, it was accepting it, letting it transform. When they dropped Elijah off at home, Maya lingered on the porch. "He's growing," she said, "every day, and you're part of that now." I'm trying to be," David replied. "I see it," she said, voice low. "You're not just showing up, you're staying." He took a step closer. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If we rewrote our story, would you still want to be in it?" She looked at him for a long moment. "We're already writing a new one. Every time you walk through that door." They stood quietly. No rush, no urgency, just understanding. David leaned in, and Maya didn't step back. Their foreheads touched gently, a silent agreement spoken through breath and stillness. Later that night, David returned to his apartment. He didn't feel alone, even though the rooms were silent. He looked out the window at the city, alive and glowing. Somewhere in that stretch of lights was a boy who called him Dad, a woman who believed in second chances, and a family tree with his name finally on it. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Maya. "Thank you for letting me earn this." Her reply came a few moments later. "You don't need to earn love, David. Just keep returning to it." He smiled, placing the phone down. Some shadows never leave, but they don't have to guide your path. Not when love becomes the compass. The weeks that followed brought rhythm, not routine, because nothing about parenting, even from a distance, ever truly becomes predictable, but rhythm. David found himself woven into the quiet fabric of Elijah's world, helping with science projects, showing up to Saturday practices, even joining Maya and Elijah for Sunday afternoon puzzles. It was unglamorous, humble, deeply grounding. He was no longer standing at the edge of a life he once abandoned. He was in it now. But even rhythm can be disrupted. One Thursday morning, David's assistant buzzed him during a strategy meeting. "There's a reporter from the Herald. She says she's working on a profile. Asked about your family." David's breath caught. "Tell her no comment. Redirect everything to legal." The call left a shadow. That evening, he called Maya. "There might be something in the papers," he said, voice low. "A reporter got wind of use of me and Elijah. I don't know how. It could be nothing, but it could be more." Maya was quiet for a moment. "What would they even say?" "I don't know," David replied. "That I abandoned my son, that I'm trying to fix my image. People love to build a villain out of a rich man with regrets." Maya's voice was calm. "And is that what this is? Image management?" "No," he said quickly. "This is the only real thing I've done in years." She exhaled. "Then we'll handle it. Together." But the next morning, her voice cracked through the phone. They posted it. Elijah's name. His picture. They found an old photo from the gala. David felt his stomach drop. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I never wanted." "He's scared," she said, fury and fear simmering beneath her words. "He's 9 years old, David. He just wanted to build rockets, not be a headline." David dropped everything. He canceled meetings, had his legal team issue cease and desist letters, and within hours, the article was pulled down, but the damage lingered. In whispers at Elijah's school. In the way Maya kept her answers clipped that night when he came to see them. Elijah sat on the couch, knees pulled to his chest, the drawing of his rocket folded in half on the coffee table. "I didn't know they'd take my picture," he said softly. David knelt beside him. "This is my fault, not yours." "Why do they care?" Elijah asked. "Why can't they just let us be?" David swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "Because people forget that behind stories are real people. You have every right to be angry." Elijah nodded, his lip trembling. "I don't want to be famous. I just want to be yours." David blinked, stunned. Then he reached out and pulled his son into a hug. "You already are, and no headline can take that away." That night, as Elijah slept, Maya and David sat in the kitchen, a candle flickering between them. "I don't know if I can do this again," she said. "The exposure, the questions, the stares." "I'll protect him," David said, "however I can." "I know you mean that," she said, "but this is the cost of your world, of your name." David leaned forward. "Then let's give him our world, not mine, not yours, ours." She looked at him, weary but searching. "And if it happens again?" she asked. "What then?" "Then I'll still be here," he said. "With you, with him. We'll face it together." The next day, David contacted a trusted journalist owned with integrity, with a history of telling real stories. He offered a controlled interview, on record, in his words, not a profile, a statement of truth. In it, he spoke of mistakes, of fear, of what it means to leave and what it takes to return. He did not mention Maya by name, he shielded Elijah. But he told the world, plainly, that fatherhood isn't about being perfect. It's about presence. When the article ran, it wasn't a scandal. It was a reckoning. And quietly, across the city, people nodded not at the wealth or the reputation but at the humility. At a man who had come home. Maya read it on the couch. Elijah curled beside her. She didn't cry, but she reached for her phone and typed only 2 words. "You're learning," David replied, "because I finally have something to learn for." Later that night, Elijah called him. "Dad?" "Yes, buddy? I think our rocket's almost ready." David smiled, voice thick. Then we better make sure the landing gear's strong. They both laughed. Sometimes, love is messy, loud, exposed. But sometimes, it's quiet, repaired, and strong enough to carry two hearts home. Spring returned with gentle warmth and scattered blossoms across the sidewalks. Trees bloomed along the park's edge where Elijah's final school projecta community rocket day was taking shape. David stood by the refreshment table in a simple blue polo, watching as volunteers set up cardboard launchers, folding chairs, and bright banners painted by the kids themselves. Maya arrived with Elijah in tow, both beaming under the late morning sun. Elijah wore a white t-shirt that read "Future Astronaut" and carried a foam rocket tucked under his arm. "He's been talking about this for weeks," Maya said, brushing back a curl that had escaped her bun. "Said he wanted to show everyone what we built together." David smiled as Elijah waved excitedly from the other end of the field. "We?" She nodded. "Us, you, me, Miss V, the whole team." Elijah ran up breathlessly. "You're coming to the countdown, right, Dad?" "Wouldn't miss it," David replied, kneeling. "Do you want me to do anything?" "Yeah," Elijah said. "I want you to push the button." David looked to Maya, then back to his son. "I'd be honored." The field soon filled with families. Parents snapped photos. Teachers handed out juice boxes. David saw faces he'd come to recognize: neighbors, classmates, community volunteers. And he realized something powerful. He wasn't just accepted here. He belonged. When it was Elijah's turn, he marched to the makeshift launch pad, his rocket standing tall and painted in bold colors. Red for bravery, blue for trust, green for growth. Miss V took the mic. "Our final launch today comes from a young explorer with a big vision, Elijah Bruckle and his co-pilot." The crowd clapped. Elijah grabbed David's hand, pulling him to the center. "Dad, come on!" David joined him, knees slightly shaking, but Elijah's grip grounded him. "5, the crowd began. 4, 3, David looked at Elijah. The boy's eyes sparkled with anticipation. 2, 1 launch. David pressed the button. The rocket soared into the sky, foam tail fluttering, cheers rising all around. Elijah whooped, jumping into the air. David laughed loud, full and free. When the rocket landed gently in the grass a few yards away, the crowd clapped, and Elijah turned to his father. "We did it," he shouted, wrapping his arms around him. David held him close, barely able to speak. Later, under a shady tree as the celebration wound down, Maya approached with a bottle of water and a tired smile. "He told me last night," she said, "that when he grows up, he wants to build rockets that help people come home." David looked at her, his voice soft. He already built one. They sat together watching the sky fade into dusk. Elijah napped on the blanket between them, a gentle rise and fall of breath. "You stayed," Maya said quietly. "I did, and you fought for the right reasons." David nodded. "Because this what we've built, it's the only thing that ever really mattered." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "So what now?" "Now," he said, "now we build the rest. A new blueprint. Together." He reached into his bag and pulled out a slim notebook. "I wrote something. For him. For us." Maya opened it. Inside were pages filled with sketches of a ship, notations, details, even tiny figures drawn together in the cockpit. She flipped to the last page. A handwritten dedication. "For Elijah, the boy who taught me how to fly. And for Maya, the woman who never stopped standing strong." Maya closed the notebook slowly. "He's going to treasure this." "I hope so," David said. Nightfall settled in. The last of the families trickled away. Elijah stirred, blinked up at the stars now appearing above. "Mom," he murmured. "Yes, love. Can we bring the rocket home?" Maya looked to David. He nodded. "Yes," she said. "We'll bring it home." Together, they gathered the pieces. Foam wings, painted nose, little flags with Elijah's name. And in the quiet, David realized something profound. He hadn't just rejoined a family. He had helped launch one into something new, something braver, truer. Built not on the past, but on the courage to rewrite the future. And for the first time in years, as they walked toward the car under the stars, David Hamilton felt no shame, no weight of regret, only gratitude, only love.